Okay, so we just finished a day of cutting with my chainsaw, 372 XP Husqvarna, and the chain is getting pretty dull. It's not cutting so fast anymore. And I want to talk about chainsaw sharpening, or chainsaw chain sharpening. There are two primary ways to sharpen your chain, especially when you're out in the field. With a file, with a hand file, and with a grinder. And in this case I have a little Oregon handheld wheel grinder, a little stone wheel here. The file is basically for, if you just want to tune up the chain. You've been using it maybe for a few hours and you haven't hit any rocks or any dirt. You've been cutting wood maybe up in the air, and the chain just isn't cutting quite as fast as it was when you started. This is a great tool. Put it in your pocket, take it with you anywhere, and you can just hit this maybe in about 10 minutes. You can have your chain just good as new again. That's usually not the case for me. Usually running these chains till they're basically burning the wood. I'm out in the woods, there's rocks everywhere, I'm cutting limbs and logs that are on the ground, and it is nearly impossible to avoid hitting something that dulls the chain to the point where you can see smoke coming up when you're trying to cut. So if you get to that point, you definitely need to grind it down. If you still got some sharp on your chain, you can hit it with the file. So I'm going to show you how to do both. This chain probably needs to get ground at this point, but I'm going to show you how to do it with the file if it was a little bit sharper, how that would get it nice and sharp. So the first thing you do, this is an 050 chain right here, 24-inch, and I don't know all the exact dimensions. I think the other dimension is 3/8, but this is a what is this? A 5/16? No, this is a 7/32 file, and that is the right file to sharpen a 3/8 050 chain. So the first thing you need to do, whether you're starting with if you're going to be sharpening with the grinding wheel or the file, is with a Sharpie, you just need to mark the top of the cutters on each side of the chain that you're starting with. So there's cutters on the right and there's cutters on the left. Right, left. And I'm just marking where I'm starting, so as I pull it around, I know when to stop. So, file. I'm going to start on the left side of the chain here. You always want to, as you're filing, you always want to go to the outside edge of the chain in this direction. And when I'm on the right side of the chain, I'm going to go in this direction as I'm filing. Something I like to do also is I like to turn the file, basically one full rotation, maybe more, as I go up. Like I'm going in slow motion right now so you can see what I'm doing. And what that does is it sharpens and it gives you like a nice little burr at the top of the cutter right there. And that ensures when you see that burr, then you know that you're sharp all the way across. You can see the burr, like, if it's all the way across or only partially across the top of the cutter, and that tells you when it's all the way across, you are sharp all the way across your cutter. Another little thing for positioning here, one is I hold the file with two hands, as you can see, and you got to have a slight upward angle to match the angle of the cutter, and that's something that you can see when you place your file in here. You can see how that angle, how it fits in there nicely when you do that. I start up here and I run all the way like that, steady and smooth with my speed as possible, and ending around there. If your chain is pretty darn sharp already, it might only take a couple passes. If your chain is getting on the dull side, it may take you 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 passes with the file. Once you start getting up to that point, it's really time to start grind your chain down with the grinder. Not use this. It's going to take a long time to get it right with the file. So I'm doing this handheld because I'm out in the field, but you can also use a file jig. I don't have one with me right here, but they are set up, they clamp to your bar, and it holds the file and it holds it in the right degree, which in this case is 35 degrees. For a cross-cut chain, you can change that to, let's say, 10 degrees, which is, if you got 35 here, 10 looks about like that. It's like more perpendicular to the bar, and that's for ripping. This 35-degree chain is generally for general use, which is mostly cross-cutting logs. So the jig is really nice for that, but the thing about the jig is it holds that file stationary. You can't turn it as you go, and you can't get that burr. And honestly, I think that for me, that's a big deterrent. I don't like how I like to spin that file and get that burr. It gives me confidence that I know I'm getting this thing sharp. That's another thing. The degree on the chain, if you can see real close here, every single one of these little cutters has a little line right here. Now that line is 35 degrees. The purpose of that is to give you some kind of guide reference when you're sharpening a crosscut chain. When I'm holding the file and I'm making my pass to sharpen, I'm always making sure that I am parallel with that line. So I'm always correcting myself. If I find myself going like this, I'll correct myself and go like that. A lot of times when you're resharpening a chain, you'll see these are pretty good. This is a pretty new chain. I've sharpened it a few times. All the edges of the cutters are pretty much parallel with the lines, but sometimes you'll see your cutters are ground down not at 35 degrees. So if you want to fix that, you can't really do that with a file. You need to grind it back down to that angle. So you should try to stay as close to that angle as possible. Now, if you're not exactly on that angle, it doesn't really matter that much. I have used all kinds of chains, ground all kinds of funny ways, and as long as they're around in that area, it'll work fine. Another thing is that when you're grinding or when you're filing, you want to make sure that you grind or file evenly on all of your cutters, because if you go shorter, if you grind away more material on one than another, it can get kind of uneven. Your cut when you're going, if you're cross-cutting, we have a log right here. So if I was cross-cutting through this log, I might actually, when I'm coming down, if my chain is not even, if the cutters are like bigger on one side than the other, or if it's alternating all over the place, I might come down at a funny angle. I might curve down. Maybe you've seen that if you've used a chainsaw enough. Sometimes, especially even when it gets dull, you'll start seeing it curving down. That just means that some cutters are sharper than others, or some have a slightly different angle than others. Or maybe the rakers are not set right. And that's the last detail of the chain that I want to talk about before I get started with the sharpening here. This little guy, this is called the raker. What this does, it basically creates, if you look at it straight on here, what it does is it creates basically a limit to how far you can take a bite out of the wood. Now, it's kind of hard to tell. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but let me see if I can do that there to kind of show you how much of a bite I'm taking. So right there, the difference between the height of that raker and the height of my cutter, that is how much in each revolution of this chain on the bar, that's how much bite of wood it's going to take off. This thing goes fast, so that doesn't seem like a lot, but actually this space right here, maybe it's a 1/16 of an inch, that is actually a lot. I like to grind my rakers down very aggressively because this saw is very powerful, and as long as I keep my chain sharp, my cutters sharp, this thing will just eat right through wood very aggressively. But don't expect to see this much deviation on all saws, especially smaller saws with lower CCs. This is very aggressive. So I'm going to get started with the sharpening. So I'm going to start, like I said, on the left side of the chain, and I'm going to start with the file here. Okay, so taking the file, holding it with two hands, matching the angle, this angle here, that is the shape of the chain, of the cutter, and I'm going to start making my passes. There I'm applying moderate pressure, spinning probably over a full turn on each pass, hugging the chainsaw with my arm here, If you have a different setup, whatever you do, just kind of hold the chainsaw body so it doesn't move. And I'm trying to go smooth and steady as possible. It is wobbling a little bit back and forth, but that's not really going to matter too much. Just keep going for it. You will get that sharp edge. And what, I got 5 passes so far, I think, 6. Now, this chain really does need a grinding. So I'm just going to do a whole bunch of passes on this file just to show you. Really, my kind of rule is if I have to do more than like 6, 7 passes, I'm not going to hit it with the file. I'm going to hit it with the grinder instead. It just takes too much time. But I'm just going to get this sharp so you can see what I'm talking about. You can see here I got half of it straight and sharp, but it falls off here, a little bit of shape. Must have hit like a little rock or nicked something. So this is going to take a few more passes. What I'm looking for is that burr that I keep talking about. And I want to see a nice straight line across the cutter head. Almost there. You can see all the shavings coming off on the file. Let's see here. Okay, that's close enough. I got it. So if you come in real close, you can see that little flake of steel coming off the front edge, and if I run my finger over it, I can feel it. It stops my finger. That's what you're looking for. When you have that, and it's all the way across the entire cutter, you know that you have got a sharp edge on the entire width of that cutter head, and then you know your chain is sharp. But like I said, I just probably did about like 15 passes on this thing, and this cutter is definitely sharp now. But I'm going to sharpen the rest of this chain with a grinder because I don't want to do 15 passes on every single one of these. Another thing to note is that since I set my rakers so aggressively already, I'm not going to grind them down on this sharpening session here. But I will show you how I do that with my grinder. You can also use a file to do it. Like a flat file works great. Just working your way across the rakers. They have little gauges that sit right on top here that that give you the recommended gauge, the recommended depth to take your raker down to. You can totally use those, and you just run your file right over that. That's like hardened steel, so it doesn't file away when you do that. But that's not going to be in this video. So let me get the grinder, and I'll show you how I do this. This grinder runs on 12 volts, so I have it hooked up to camper battery there. Alright, so again, this is a just like the file, this is a 7/32 wheel. And funnily enough, I actually get better results as I run this wheel down a little bit, once it gets a little bit smaller. And you'll see why in a second. But it's a brand new wheel. So again, you keep that same angle that we had with the file, and I'm going to turn this thing on. It just spins. It's spinning in this direction, so the same direction I was spinning the file, so I can get my my burr coming off the edge there. And I'm going to move this thing back and forth to try to evenly wear this stone down. If you don't do that, it gets like bulbous in certain areas, and then you're not grinding evenly. So here we go. Okay, so I just ground until I saw that little flake I was talking about, that burr. Actually, here, if you zoom in real close, you can see a little bit of that burr left right there. Hopefully you can see that. It's really only on the edge there, so and I just knocked it off. So I can feel it. I did sharpen that thing fully. Let me just move right on to the next one then. And what I like to do here is I'll pinch the cutter that I'm at and pull it back so I can get to my next one. Now I know that my next one to sharpen is right there. If you zoom on this one, you can see this one definitely hit something at some point. It's a little scraped up there, and I can see visually that that this edge is not perfect and it's a little bit rounded over. So this grinder is going to take that right out. Okay. Okay, so that is definitely sharp now. The reason I'm not seeing a burr is what I was explaining before. When this guy is a full 730 seconds, it just doesn't make a burr. It's too big to do that. As soon as I wear this thing down a little bit and it becomes a little bit smaller, it fits in here, like it doesn't fill up all the space in that curve, and then I can kind of like dig in and get in, and more, instead of it coming up on the cutter, it kind of comes more out away from me on the cutter, and that's when I really get that nice burr. So it's going to take a little bit, a few passes with this before I start seeing that. I'm just going to move right on. What I'm looking for right now is a nice, sharp, straight edge. And as I'm grinding, I can see that happening. Okay, this one now you can see the burr across the whole thing. Hopefully you guys can see that. And I can feel it. It's significant. Actually, if you come in and look from the side, you might be able to see it. Right there, my finger's getting stuck. Boom. Right there. You can actually see it on my finger. It wiped off some of the dirt off my finger. The burr did. Alright, moving on. I'm going to keep on doing that all the way around until I get back to my black marks, and then I'm simply just going to come over on this side and do the same thing with my left hand in the other direction. So I hope I was able to explain chainsaw sharpening a little bit more in layman's terms. It took me a good long time, probably over the course of a year, to really like understand. People told me to sharpen in different ways and for different reasons and look for different things, but I've found that with all of the tree work and chainsaw work I've done in the last year here, which is hundreds and hundreds of hours, I have found this works the best for me, and hopefully it works for you too. I'll show you how to take the chain and the bar off the saw. So you got 2 bar nuts and a tensioner. The tensioner is what tightens the chain around the bar, and in order to loosen it, we need to first break the bar nuts.